You can bring it through the window. All right. Welcome to Radio Blasphemy, um, where I podcast or stream from uh, my rear porch. It originally was in Club Closet, which was a room in my basement, which is now turned into a control room for my son's bands. What him up, Sally? Very quickly, I think there's a lot to talk about today. The goings-ons in Minneapolis. We can discuss how how that affects the nation. Let's throw some conspiracy theories into it. What it is, there's always the Soros conspiracies. And I'm gonna give somebody a little bit of credit for showing me a video that just kind of floored me. With regard to as always, every time we have situations where you have rioting or disparity or a situation where you can put it there, where we have riots. It's not kidding. It's not the first time. You had Ferguson. 6 years ago, something like that. We have these troubles in society that cause them, and what's causing them? Many are going to argue, and I've seen a lot of it. Unemployment, number one, is one that I saw today. The disparity. My son actually said that one of those things is oppression. Can we argue that our people are truly oppressed? And I asked the question: how are people oppressed these days? I would love to see some of your feedback, because he couldn't answer the question. It's just a keyword, a word that just kind of evokes emotion. Oh, we're oppressed. Well, yeah, show me how you're oppressed. I'm going to argue some things that are going to piss off some people. Now, as you all have known, I typically like to play devil's advocate. Why? Because it's a lot of fun. I like to argue with people. It causes you to think. It causes me to think. It's a benefit. I don't know sometimes where my beliefs are, because I think your beliefs sometimes can be swayed. Sometimes you learn things, and all of a sudden you have to accept things as that can be different. So, let's first off, if I'm sure many of you have seen the video. Do I believe George Floyd was unjustly murdered? And I'm going to use the word murder, and it's not typical of me, because it's like, well, you don't understand the circumstance. That definitely appears like murder. He was put in a circumstance in which his life was basically taken due to the result of another human being. Now, it's not a bullet wound, but he did cause some damage somewhere along the line. And I'm not one to beat up on policemen. And we're going to discuss that as well. I don't like to beat up on policemen, because they have a civil job, and one that I believe is very strenuous to them. They live a life that sees, they work in a field that sees the worst of humanity, day in and day out. Constantly, they see the worst of us. We're not as exposed to that, but they do. And it's not just with one ethnic group or another. It's all across the board. And when I say humanity, I mean humanity. They see the worst of us. Because when things go bad, those are the first people we call. You don't call your parents when you're being robbed. You don't call your neighbor when you're being assaulted. You call for the police. And when you're being, and yet, when errors are committed, and they are human, we chastise them and punish them. So I have a hard time beating them up for that. because they endure so much. So yes, to me, they are fragile. They are fragile people. They are just like you and I. Can you imagine that? Seeing the atrocities that human beings commit on each other, and then we have the nerve to judge them? We are the ones that put them, and I put myself in that situation. I'm sorry, I'm popping my peas here. But we're the ones that put them in that situation. And I'm not saying me specifically, I'm saying society. And yet we are quick to criticize. I don't know the circumstance under which this policeman, I just haven't done enough research on under what situation or where he was emotionally, nor do I care to. But to me, I think most policemen can be ticking time bombs. As a city, as a governing agency, I don't think we do enough for them to keep them from mentally collapsing. I know for a fact that there are many that are afraid to be on the streets. I don't know if changing shifts are. Michelle's making a comment about changing the shifts. I don't think that would matter. It's the workload that affects them. That we're talking the circumstances of their job force them to behave and to deal with things that the rest of us don't. So, you can run around and say, fuck the police. And I hate that. But the truth is, the first thing when you're in danger, they are the first ones you are calling. So, doesn't mean that they are perfect. And I will not defend what this policeman did to George Floyd. That's heinous. That's such a horrible thing. I was very moved, not by the fact that he says I can't breathe, but the man was calling out his mother. And if you can't feel that, then you yourself are short of human. But I felt that. That puts a very human connection, and I think we can all identify with that. So, having said that about that, there is how does society react? Protests, sure. Riots, looting. What does that say about us? And I guess that goes back to what we talk about. This is an oppressed people, and because they are an oppressed people, we are going to. I should say, I'm including myself as that. As an oppressed people, we behave in certain ways. In some cases, unjustifiably so. We can't be quiet. But how do we change this without further affecting it? Let's take into consideration. They looted businesses. Let's start with the looting. For many years, you're always hearing how people don't invest into minority neighborhoods, or many businesses just don't invest. Why? Well, let's look at the economics. Is it a neighborhood that has expendable cash? And that's a reality. Nobody wants to lose money. No business wants to lose. You're in the business to make money, not to lose money. Excuse me. So as such, when you do have an opportunity, and these neighborhoods, from what I understand, the South Minneapolis is a poorer neighborhood, and yet when given the opportunity, the first thing they do is loot. Now, granted, you have businesses like Target, AutoZone. These are national chains, and you know what will happen? Insurance companies will pay for their losses. Not a big deal, right? So there's no loss. What there is a loss of business for that community. And when you lose that business to that community, they may not come back. And if they don't come back, now you have that same circumstance, that same issue where you don't have companies investing in your neighborhood. Why? Because the moment something goes awry, this is a behavior. Now, is it right? Is it wrong? I'm nobody to judge. It's not my business, not my place to judge. It's an observation. And mine is to just point this out at this point. Now, you talk about, well, and this has been discussed throughout our feed today about, no, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. About, these are big corporations. Who cares? That's how you send a message up to the rich, right? Well, how many small businesses were affected? When you think about cellular stores, those are franchises, which in most times, and sometimes really, they're owned by, they're owned as franchises. So some small guy who, Lord knows what he went through to open up his business, is now devastated. Yes, again, insurance companies take care of that. And those people come back. You know why? Because there's a market in those neighborhoods for cell phones, just like in any, I guess. I'm drinking water. It's not vodka. So, but there's other businesses that are in that neighborhood. And what happens is, most people don't think about this. When you have a business like Target, AutoZone, or these malls, they are the anchor business, but there are other big, small businesses that do depend on these anchor businesses to bring in their foot traffic. If I go to Target to buy whatever it is, I know that a couple of stores down, a couple right down the block, there's a small business that I will go buy, you name it, a hot dog, my whiskey bottle, you name it. Whatever it is, those businesses attract other small businesses. When you put them out, that other small business is truly affected. And that at the end of the day, that hurts that community. So why would you ravish it? Again, I guess that's in our nature, right? So what is the solution? At this point, I got a few listeners. So why don't you go ahead and give me some feedback? There should be legislation to limit the terms on policemen, I think. I don't think a policeman should be a policeman 25 years. 25 years of enduring violence? That's horrible. Not just legislation, but other things that can help. And again, I'm at a loss for that. Maybe better training, psychological help, and I know that psychological help is already offered, but is it enough? And we don't know that. I mean, I don't think any of you are policemen. Let me catch my breath. I can talk so much. I'm always going to ask you to share the podcast, share the if you can, go back to the Facebook page and let everybody know there that we are live, and to engage in the conversation. I'd appreciate it. But getting back to what solutions are. Here in Chicago, I had a video shared with me. There's two that I have to discuss. One, we're beginning to heat up here. People are beginning to take to the streets. We are coming out of a almost 3 month shelter in place. And what is our reaction to this? Let's take to the street and start to protest. You know what they're going to do? They're going to shut us right back down. We have not been hurt enough. And you can argue, well, who is it that's doing it? Well, maybe people that don't care. Maybe somebody that has nothing else to lose. I don't know. But in my instance, I do have plenty to lose. What happens to those businesses? As I've discussed before, mine is one of the severely impacted by the shelter in place. What if we're shut down even longer? Because people don't know how to behave. It's a very emotional situation, and I can't deny that. You can't deny it. Nobody can deny it. It's there's just cause. It's very it's very disheartening. But violence begets violence. Is that the solution? Two rights don't make a wrong, or was the other way? Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm sorry. There has to be a change, a shift in society's thinking, in order to improve this. And I don't think, as a society, we are ready. We argue about presidential candidates. We argue, and this is how ridiculous it seems to me, about old millionaires who are disconnected from society at large to represent us. And we argue about this passionately, feverishly. And they could care two shits about us. And excuse the language, but that's really ultimately what it comes down to. They don't care about you. They care about a bottom dollar. And yet, some of us defend them as if they're our heroes. They are not your heroes. Sometimes it's fun, and I guess maybe me being such a devil's advocate that I like to argue, sure, so I'll jump on the other side of the fence. Sometimes just because I'm entertained by the fact that you can argue with somebody that's so, and I'm going to use the word dumb, to believe that a 70-something-year-old man who you will never probably meet is looking out for your best interest. That kind of makes you a sad man, woman, child, it doesn't matter, robot, sheep. But yet these are the people that set policy in place that cause these kinds of problems. And they sit in their comfy little homes, in their cushy little desks, far, far away, and push buttons and allow these things to happen. Now, you say allow, or how can you say that a government agent will allow? Well, there are many tools that can be used to prevent this. What they are, God, without trying to sound too communistic, there's just the ability to grow the economy. That's create jobs. How do you create jobs? The government themselves, you don't want them to create jobs directly because they will create more government jobs. And that's a problem. Well, what does a government job produce? What tangible product does it produce? I truly would like to know. Oh, well, military. No, they outsource all of that stuff. They have, Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Those are private companies that produce. So you don't want to give them jobs. So as we learned when they issued the stimulus package for small business, what did they do? They sent it out to the banks. So maybe sending that money and truly making that money available to investments. That's how you stimulate an economy. You create jobs in that manner. Now, as a businessman, I'm going to be reluctant to open up in an area where they burned down the auto zone and they took my inventory of liquor. However, the smart man sees opportunity in chaos. And there is. That's where you are the most profitable. But there's such a disparity So let's talk about people that would invest into those neighborhoods. Um, I don't know. I'd be hesitant. Would any of you? I don't think you'd line up for it. What happens is that's when things are primed for gentrification. And then we'll fight that. Why? Because we like the way things were. Violent. That makes us sad. Pathetic almost. But that's in our nature, I guess. And yes, I'm insulting some of you. Leaders are to be for the people, not divide the people. That is, in theory, such a beautiful thing to say. But at the end of the day, what they divide us to keep us weak. They keep us divided to keep us weak. Together, yes, the government is. They have forgotten that they work for us, not the other way around. And by keeping us weak, divided, I don't want to call it an uprising or rebellion, because that's. You ever think about taking on the U.S. Army? I haven't. That sounds crazy to me. Taking to the streets and rioting? You think about this for 1 second. The National Guard walking down your block, marching, putting you in place. That's a scary notion. Call me a coward. But that's still a scary notion. Can we fight that? I think we surrendered the ability to fight our government. I think we did that a long time ago. We gave them too much power, and now we're caught up in a position that we can't fight them. The police force is the first. But we're talking about you escalate that. A nation turning on its own self? No, Michelle, he is not a tyrant. He is the ringmaster in a 3-ring circus. Well, maybe a 2-ring circus if you want to call the Republican Party and the Democratic Party a ring for each. What he is the ringmaster. But you know what the truth is? He does not own the circus. We are and we are all spectators in the circus, and that's a great analogy as far as I'm concerned, because he does not own the circus. He also was hired by somebody else to entertain us, and while they entertain us, and we can all argue that we are easily distracted. I mean, if you follow the news, and most of you I think do, you have the intelligence, and there's enough information out there. He's not that bright, Michelle. He's not that bright to plant seeds. Somebody else did. So so when you go to a circus, the ringmaster is just there to distract you. Look at me, pay attention to me while all this is going on. And the ring circus has got 2 shows going on. So the first show in our case was the whole virus, the whole pandemic. On the other ring now, we have riots in Minneapolis, and everybody's focused on that. In the meantime, and I credit this one to Michelle, that she actually pointed out that today the Trump administration is looking to sign an executive order with concern to social media and freedom of speech. Now, what's interesting about that, he's trying to punish entities like Google and Facebook and Twitter. Of course, he'll say stupid things, and then he expects nobody to be critical of him. So yeah, maybe in that regard, he looks like a tyrant. Don't question me. Well, it's a bigger picture than that. That's what we're being told, so we can accept it as part of the entertainment, and we're accepting it because once he's gone, we'll forget about these executive orders, because that's how we are. We'll be distracted by something else. You name the next big fire. And when we're distracted, they'll execute those orders, and here we are. And those are scary notions, and we'll accept it. You'll ignore them. That's because that's who we are. Absolutely. Government is equal to David Copperfield. They know how to entertain us. Who doesn't enjoy a good David Copperfield show? I do. Michelle, what could you possibly go? Although, to be fair, I have considered moving south of the border. I'm afraid to put up on a border wall. They might keep me on this side. I'm not moving. I'm not afraid to live in this country. It's still the greatest country in the world. Although, if Netflix recently, I saw a documentary, a show called History 101. It's only a matter of time before China catches up to us and then passes up. It's ridiculous. A very interesting show. But it's called History 101, and I think it's the second and third episode that talks about that. Canada? Oh, I guess you can get away with moving to Canada. I just don't do well with cold anymore. I'm so over it. It's funny. But it doesn't matter. The man is... part of his shtick, if you want to call it that, is for people to hate him. At least a sector of the population to hate him. And he's doing an amazing job. He's evoked so much emotion, so much anger, and we buy it. But what do you do? Arizona. Sally wants me to move to Arizona. Arizona is beautiful. Hot, I hear. Hot, but beautiful. Jose, if you can, any of you guys, post under the page that I'm live on YouTube. If you guys share the link, I would greatly appreciate it. That way, it saves me. The fireworks are going off. That way, we can get more engagements here. Yes, call it selfish. I can go on, but without, well, I guess I still got much to talk about. So, giving a little bit of credit to one of our subscribers or one of our fans on the Radio Blasphemy page, showed me a video, which I found very interesting. And if you guys look at the comments for some of the stuff today, it was a man or woman, I couldn't even decipher, holding an umbrella, dressed in black, and I believe the face was covered with big glasses. I couldn't really tell. And he was the AutoZone that caught fire, the one that's making the national news. He was there before it caught fire. People were still walking in and out, as shopping as normal. And what he was doing was breaking the windows. He had a hammer in his hand, what appeared to be a hammer, and breaking the windows. Now, the people that were in the vicinity, it seemed odd to them that somebody would do that, because he wasn't exactly your rioter. He was just somebody that was causing chaos. This kind of goes into the whole George Soros thing, that he sent them to, incite riot. And the thing is, we're so mentally malleable that if we see the broken windows, we're going to act on that. And I think that's this case, that he broke the windows, and then he was walking away. It's weird because he's holding a black umbrella. As a matter of fact, I'll make sure that it becomes like on top of our page. And then as he walks away, people are questioning him. Are you the police? It was weird. So there's the good in humanity that says, man, there's something not right. Eventually, if last night I stayed up late watching the riots, believe it or not, a lot of those people were just very drunk. It was like an outdoor party. It's easy to get swayed, I guess. I'm a little older now, so I don't know if I'd be so concerned about going and enjoying a riot or a protest or anything. I'll get hurt and forget it. I might not make it back, and it might not be that serious. But we were talking about these riots yesterday, and it just seemed like a party. And you know the fires were bonfires, and everybody looked like they were having a good time, except the police, of course. Yes, Michelle, 3 a.m. I was up that late. I think I shared the video. This was a watch party. Milo saying that Trump is the ultimate political troll. He says shit to get a rise out of the general public. Absolutely. Um, I don't know if we had a chance to. My computer's going off. I don't know if you guys, like I said, I was talking about, and this was fascinating. Milo brought up the Chinese right now, substandard products. In this history 101, I was blown away. What do you all know about Wuhan? They said the province of Wuhan. Well, when it comes to find out, when I'm watching this show, they have multiple cities in China that have minimum population of 10 million, and that's what they do. They build cities to create a workforce. Yes, it may be an inferior product, but despite Milo's opinion, you know what we're doing? We're buying it. Why? If it's such an inferior product, why do we buy it? Why? Because it's cheap. Shame on us. We are consumers. We are a nation of consumers. It's called consumerism. Yeah. Hector says the police officers, along with the civil workers, high rates of alcoholics and other addictions. But let's talk about China for a second. What are we doing? What will we do when they surpass us as an economy? We're already buying knockoffs. Raise your hands if you've ever bought a knockoff. No, there are many. Milo says that there are very few options. No, there are very few cheap options. You can buy American, but a little more difficult, but it's also going to be very expensive. We can sit here and argue unions all day long, and that could be part of the problem. Part of the reason the Chinese can build a city in 2 years, and I'm getting distracted from what I wanted to discuss today, but they can build a city in 2 years. Why? Because they don't have the same labor laws and environmental laws and anything along that goes, life is cheap there. Milo, you might have missed most of what we were talking about, but I'm sympathetic towards our police force because they, ultimately, they are subjected to the worst of humanity. They experience things that most of us will never. I said it earlier that when we are in a hurling situation and in scary situations, we don't call our mothers. We don't call our neighbors. We don't call our children. We call the police when we are in danger. And they show up. They show up despite it all. You could have just spat in their face and they will still show up to defend you. That doesn't say anything. And again, it's going to be, I know it's like, oh my God, you're defending the police. Well, I'm not defending the actions that happened in Minneapolis because that, like I said earlier, that is murder. But I have to defend what they do for the most part. One bad cop. I know many have argued one bad cop. Yeah. Sometimes that's all it takes, and that can destroy the confidence that is built by so many. Personally, I hope this policeman does face murder charges, because what he did is horrible. Cheryl just asked if I think their job desensitizes them. Absolutely. There's so much to be said about their job. They become desensitized is a good word. They and they have to go home to their families, their wives, their children, after seeing what they've seen. How many dead people, dead children, abused animals? God, you can go that far. And yet we sit here and criticize them. Again, not defending the actions of what happened in Minneapolis. But now, let's talk about, are the actions justified? I think you did more harm than good. You want to protest large businesses, and this was a big argument today, because you want to send a message to the people with the money. Show them by not buying. It's a slow, painful death, if you will. Boycott. Protest City Hall. Vote. Send letters to your representatives. I know that sounds like it's tedious, but that is effective. Yes, you're not going to make the news. Maybe you will, if you get enough people to support your cause. You definitely made the news with this. Could there have been a more peaceful way? And it would probably have never garnered the same attention. And maybe this was what's needed. But, I can't. I'm nobody. I'm a fool that's sitting in the back porch talking about things that are far away. But again, it's something we are ultimately all affected. Let's see here. Milo says that many of those people are unfit to be policemen. I wouldn't go as far. Well, yes, and not in that. I'm not going to go that far in saying it in that manner that they are unfit. They grown unfit, and this is what we were talking about earlier. That there should be a limitation, because it's an incredibly mentally stressful job, and there's not enough being done to I'm going to use the word just to help them. And this causes them essentially to sometimes turn onto society. Coming together as people. I don't want to kill anybody. That's the wrong message, my man. That is the wrong message. We don't want to kill people. You don't want to be the victim, and I don't want to victimize. Unite? I completely agree. I agree. Let's unite. And there is a force and there's much to be said about that. But killing is not an answer. Killing is never going to be an answer. That lowers you. That makes you. It almost makes you subhuman. Could you imagine if that same police force united and took that same mentality? I guarantee you, if the Chicago Police Department took to the street with we're going to kill them all, it would be a massacre, and it'd be a long, hard battle. but many, way too many would lose their lives. Is it worth it? And at the end of the day, I'm going to disagree. Do things need to change? Yes. Things definitely need to change. And how do we change that? Maybe I'm an old man, and my way is thinking of a peaceful route and using legislation and the power of votes, the power of your dollar. But it can also be a very effective way. I live in a ward that our alderman is very involved. We get results. We do get results, but an involved community. Let's talk about, over the holiday weekend, there was so many shootings and so many killings here in the city of Chicago. As far as I know, and I could be wrong. I mean, there's going to be, something to look at. But as far as I know, it wasn't the police doing the killing, but regular citizens doing it on other citizens. Mr. Meth Fan, if they really wanted to kill us, trust me, they would. If that's their desire, I love this guy. I don't know who you are, but I love that you're bringing that point up, because that's a point. That's a point that says, this is a mentality. That's a mentality, and you're not wrong for that. I mean, it's a horrible message, but can't say that you're wrong. I'm not judge, no jury. The problem with this, for the policeman that acted in this case, he became judge, jury, and executioner, and that's horrible. And if we all lived by that, we'd all be in a lot of trouble. We'd have a lot of problems. His time will come. His time will come, and he will pay the price for what he did. Again, I don't believe all policemen are in that mentality. I would really like to think that that's not the way they all think. No, you're right. There is nothing wrong with defending the police. But also, when they are wrong, they are wrong. And that's something that needs to be acknowledged. I don't know who Metfan is, but I'm thinking this guy's polarism, if you will. They are killing us. Now the corona bullshit, it's come from a lab. Sure. Even if we can prove that, what good is it going to do us? Everything that we've seen up to date, it seems like there's a lot of lies that have come from that as well. The CDC is retracting a lot of the things that they initially told us. I think at some point we can always discuss the end game. I don't know who Metfan is, but listen to some of the previous podcasts, and I think you can get some of the feel for what we have done. But it's what's the end game? Giving us, ruining small business to what end? Now we can talk about the economics of it, and there's a lot of that behind it. What are some of the economics? Corporate companies existing over the small ones. Eliminating us depending on that. We talked about the banking system, how it's set up. Owning I'm gonna hang. I'm gonna hang on this for a little bit, man. You're entertaining me, and no offense by that. You pay their wages. You own the police cars. You own their guns. No. You don't own them. And I believe at least here, he's saying he's from Australia. They buy their own guns here. So I don't want to own a human being. Their job essentially is to protect us. And I know that's so hard on a day like today to say that they're protecting us, but we are talking 99.999% of the time they are here for our protection. Again, I was discussing what's happened here in the city of Chicago over the weekend. Most of the murders, most of the shootings are not police turning on its citizens. It's a citizen on another citizen. What about Benny Boy? So, citizens attacking other citizens, is that less of a crime? No, and I do understand that we hold our police to a higher somebody help me out, to a higher capacity. They're supposed to know better because they were trained to do their job, and we expect them to do it. And when they don't, this is the kind of stuff that happens. Some actors saying this is very interesting. Create what kind of jobs? When in my opinion, these kids today are not interested in basic knowledge. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we live in a society that's mainly based on consuming. So consumerism. As long as we have something to entertain us, phones, what else? TV, cars. We idolize the material possessions of the world. Sometimes we can argue. I can't remember the show, but it was funny. It was a vampire show, I think, where he had awakened. It was Dracula. He had been awakened, or in modern times, and he crashed into somebody's house or broke into somebody's house, and he said how we all lived in opulence and wealth, and it was this rundown ass house, but we live better than we have, at least than many of our previous generations. It's just now we set that standard much higher. Yeah, that's a very good question, Jose. Does anybody know how often they get a psychological evaluation? I wonder if it's an ongoing thing. I would think it should be. Or is it after a traumatic experience that they get checked? But it should be often. I don't. I hate. The question was asked: there is hate in their hearts? They hate people of color. We need real leaders that spread love and teach others what it is to love and respect human lives. So, in this case, the question is the question being asked: do the police really hate other people? And I have some doubts there. They you may have missed most of this conversation in this regard that these people, the police, they face so much on a daily basis that they're traumatized. So I don't know if I'm gonna use the word hate, but rather confused about where their emotions lie, and that's why they need, like Jose stated, a psychological evaluation on a consistent basis, so they can discern between what the rest of humanity, or how humanity actually functions. The reality is, I think for the most part, we are good people. I think for the most part. Can be argued, but I think for the most part, most of us have good intentions in our hearts. And even the policemen, even I think the most hardened criminal, at times they act because maybe sometimes out of necessity. But here we are. Those are things that we are contending with. Hold on one second. I think I lost a little bit of audio. Oh, there we go. people in general. Oh, okay. I do apologize for that, but it does people full of hate. You think so? I don't know. I just said that comment that I think for the most part we have goodness in our heart. Think about the family you surround yourself with. Think about your friends. Think about people that you, for the most part, that even just there may be acquaintances. We have a good vibe with each other. I don't know if I'm a good person, but just a shit talker. Excuse the language once again. I do appreciate all of you listening. I appreciate your comments. Um, I'm a regular person, and um, that's pretty much it. And I don't wish any harm on most people. Notice how I said most people. There are people that they make it difficult for me to like them. But there's there's nothing wrong with that. I guess as you just long as you don't actually act on that. Um, we are good loving people, bro. But what about those that truly hate? Well, then that's one of those that we deal with. The other day we got into a religious discussion. You can be an atheist, agnostic. It doesn't matter. You can quote the Bible, make you super religious man. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, excuse me. At the end of the day, there's one rule that's the most perfect of all. Is treat those as you wish to be treated. I know that's not quoted exactly, but it's pretty much the gist of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. How do I want to be treated? I want to be treated nicely. So if I want to be treated nicely, I treat others nicely. How difficult is that? Oh, Felix, super racist. I haven't read your comment yet, but you're saying super racists hate people that are not like them. Why? Simply because we are not white. So this was an interesting one. Let's throw reverse racism. Does it exist? So what does that mean? Does and I'm asking you, in your case, you brought up white people hating everybody else. So you think about this for 1 second. Can black people hate other races? And the resounding answer to that, for me personally, I've seen it, is yes. Now, because you have cause or reason, it doesn't matter. Racism is racism. Hate is hate. So if you're a racist and you say bad things and you judge people before knowing them, you are a racist. Not just because you judge them, but that's just prejudicial. Racism involves hate. And hate is an ugly word. Excuse me. So if you're hating based solely on race, you don't have to be black, white, Chinese, or for that matter, anything. You're a racist. So yes, reverse discrimination. So let's here's one that I'm gonna pose out there, and I would really want to see you all give some feedback on this. Do you think, and I'm asking in sincerest way, that do you really think that he was killed under racial motivations? Do you really believe he was killed because he was black? I don't know. I'm gonna go with just the good in people and say no. Do I believe that in the recess of the policeman's mind, it might have been slightly racially motivated? I'm not talking about a supremacist KKK, I hate you type of motivation, but rather one where 6 months ago, some black person gave him a hard time, and that's sitting fresh in his head or sitting there. Who knows what it was? Doesn't really matter. It's an incident that never occurred or did. A hypothetical, and now that caused him or triggered him in this moment. Let's see here. Let's look at some of your responses here. You cannot prejudge. It's difficult, but I guess, yeah. I'm not talking about race. I'm talking prejudice is one thing, racism is another. Racism, the intro to the page says, involves hate. Prejudice means before knowing them, you kind of already have this predisposition about them. You know, I'm gonna use a funny one. You see a cholita, you know what you're gonna expect. Yeah, we are a melting pot. So yes. It seems a very. Cheryl, I like your yes. Fear and experience. Fear and experience is more of a cause versus a straight just that's a black man that I'm going to put down because he's black. I think more of a previous circumstance, a mental condition that kind of put him in that position. So it's very interesting. Yeah. And I think that's the problem that you guys are my general audience right now, and well, I'm gonna get to what you just said, Michelle. I think because of that mentality, that it was racially motivated, and the belief is that, especially being a minority, you believe that it was motivated by hate, and that's kind of the tragedy. So we in ourselves, in doing so, are being racist. And I'm not trying to cut anybody down, but in doing so, we're playing the same card. Granted, we're not killing other people because of that, but essentially we've just done it, believing that something is racially motivated just because he was a white cop and a black man that died. Yes, Michelle, teaching our children. You don't teach them hate, but you do teach them tolerance. However, and I'm finding this and I'm learning this. Their own personal experiences sometimes dictate to them, and this is just exactly what I was finished saying. Excuse me. Their own personal experiences dictate to how they treat others. And this is now, there is no denying this, that culturally we are all very different. So as we are different, we have so many differences culturally, and this is what I mean about teaching people tolerance. You teach your children tolerance. So when they encounter other cultures, they know how to handle it. Their own feeling on that is going to be their own, and there's nothing you and I or anybody can do about that. That's human emotion. That's the human element. You can't force people to like something, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's just when you're talking about hate that it changes. Oh, you guys are on fire now. Thank you. I don't even know how long I'm in on this. Evidently, I had some sort of widget problems or something or the other. So, some dude don't need to have his knees on his back. Yeah, I know. I completely agree. It's murder. What he did is murder. I see. We have the Irishman amongst us. Yes, that's a very Milo makes a very interesting point, and maybe this is another perspective, and it's a very good one. He said, no, he wasn't killed because he was black, but he was killed. He killed a man because he felt empowered. Dude happened to be black. I believe the cop is a racist to a degree. Well, this kind of goes back to an experience. So, and you're absolutely correct. There are many policemen that have and again, I defended you guys for a while here, so let's put this there. There's sometimes an attitude amongst policemen that they're um, greater than thou, and that's it comes with the job, I guess, because uh, they're people of authority, and but nonetheless, as they are still human, they interpret that as an empowerment. Not a good thing. It doesn't give you the right to take anybody's life. Unfortunately, in the modern age, put this back 50 years ago, no cameras, he may have gotten away with it, unfortunately. And this is probably what's ultimately going to be good for society. They can no longer get away with things that they have gotten away with. Uh, God, we could talk about the Chicago police, not so much in the modern era, but in our history, what they actually got away with. How many people, settlements and wrongful convictions have occurred? All right, Milo, that cop looked racist. I'm sorry, I'm seriously entertained by that one. He looked racist. uh, I guess racists can have a look. I don't know. Usually I can't tell. Sometimes they're wearing cloaks over their heads, their hoods. That's so I'm not able to identify. But yes, modern racism doesn't need the hood, I guess. Are you guys entertained? um, uh, all right. I don't know. I think we can save a little more for later. I'm trying to be as in touch with everybody as I can. Um, we're coming up on nicer days. Um, I do have a patio with a yard with a patio rather, an outdoor table. We can set up a couple mics. Maybe one person at a time. Keep some social distancing. If you guys want to come in and join me here, it's a semi-open invitation. I'm pretty stern on my filtering, so don't get excited. Even if I'm making the offer, that you're welcome. I may not like you, and I'm being sincere there. But uh, you know, engage in the page. Let's if you guys want to continue the conversation, once this post, let's continue. It's a great topic. Let's invite people to hear it, and then let's fight. I'm good for conversation. Just do so intelligently. Having said all that, this is Radio Blasphemy. Thank you all for checking me out today. Love you all.